When we look at preparing the way for our children to age, it is a structured and planned event where we are giving them the education, the physical prowess, the medical care that they need in order to help them grow healthy bodies, minds, and spirits to be able to take on all that adulthood holds for them. However, we don't have that same structure when it comes to the aging process, and we've talked about this before. There is no path that is understood and standardized for everybody of how we deconstruct the adult life and autonomy into the aging process in a way that mirrors the reverse of how we prepare for our children. So when we have preparation, when we think ahead, and I know it's really hard to think about the end of life, but when we have a plan in place, things no longer are scary. We're able to go on autopilot a little bit more and decrease the mental load that we're carrying so that we are able to just work the plan. A lot of us don't prepare because we know that working the plan involves talking about things that are really scary. Perhaps they've caused conflict in your family before, but they are something that create a lot of anxiety because you don't want to talk about things, fearing that you're going to make your parent afraid. But what I've discovered is that parents are not typically afraid of the actual aging process. They're afraid of the crisis and losing the autonomy or the ability to make decisions for self along the way. Losing that autonomy and that ability to make decisions for yourself is something that all of us are scared of. It's why a lot of us will say things like, if I'm in a horrible car accident and I can't take care of myself anymore, that's not a life that I want to lead because I then have lost the autonomy and the ability to care for myself. So it's really, really important that we recognize that the fear that we are not having the conversations in trying to prevent from happening is not the actual fear that people have. But when we put in a structure that allows us to walk through those fears logically in a slow fashion over the course of many years, and in a way that is honoring of the acknowledgement that losing your self-governance is incredibly threatening, we can actually decrease the conflict, we can decrease the temperature of the conversation, and we can have some tough conversations without the emotional resistance that we think that we are going to receive from our parents. The resistance that most people feel when they first start these conversations can feel incredibly dangerous to us. We have grown up in a society that doesn't do conflict well. We either are too hostile or we avoid the situation altogether and pretend like it never happened. And so learning to be able to have conversations where we may potentially meet resistance is something that is a skill set that we have to learn. If we don't learn this, it is very difficult for us to navigate the conversations that feel uncomfortable. We see this in an entire generation of adults who are estranged from their parents. It is because we have not well learned how to have uncomfortable conversations and save the relationship while still not pretending like it has not happened. So that resistance that we're afraid of is really an internal work that we need to work on because we have been trained that conflict is not safe. So learning to have these conversations in a way that is controlled, measured, and respectful of everybody's feelings can feel like an insurmountable conversation. And that's really why I've laid out the protocol the way that I have. How do we have micro moments of conversation, little tiny bits, so that we can slowly basically inoculate our systems into being okay with uncomfortable conversations with people. That does not mean that it always goes perfect. In fact, this week I had the conversation with multiple people about how when we learn to have uncomfortable conversations, the first couple are really, really messy. They're really uncomfortable, and it can feel very disheartening because we all want to be perfect as soon as we start trying to do something hard and new. I don't want you to avoid them because you might meet resistance. I want you to expect resistance and learn how to walk through that anyway. The resistance that we see typically in these conversations truly has to do with the fear of losing the ability to make my own choices. So the way that I have laid out the protocol allows us to acknowledge, I don't want you to be afraid. Let me support you in making your decision now while you have the capacity to do so. When we have that conversation early, it allows everyone to express their needs, their wants, their desires, and their capabilities, because we need to have those conversations. And the resistance goes down when we start honoring what the other person is saying. Having a stepwise progression through some basic scripts can really give you a starting point. The first time that we sit down to have a tough conversation, I think it's important to acknowledge that maybe we have not done this well to this point. Being able to say, we've not historically been able to have these conversations about the future and what it holds for your aging process. But I want to start. And so let's just commit 5 minutes to this conversation. We don't have to have any big fights. We can just say what's on our mind, but we're going to start with 5 minutes. And that de-escalates the whole situation. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to commit to sitting at the table and getting through this conversation until we come to resolution. I want you to have 5-minute conversations. That lowers the stakes of these conversations, allows you to step away after 5 minutes and think through things and think about ways you could do better or ways that you could approach things a little bit differently. Those 5-minute conversations can build into an entire library of understanding of the person that you are going to end up caring for. In these 5-minute conversations, you will find that you're able to talk about the future in ways that don't overwhelm your parents or you, or require a lot of time and emotional steeling of yourself and armor of yourself to be able to get through. So it's really important that we break up these conversations into small, bite-sized chunks. That's why I talk about within the protocol that it's so important that we are starting these conversations decades before we need them, because that way we de-escalate the situation. We're not talking about next week, we're not talking about tomorrow, we're not even talking about next year. Instead, what we are doing is we are establishing a conversation of trust. We are establishing what you would want and just opening the conversation. The protocol actually opens with bite-sized recommended conversations, starting with the least important to the most important, because we always want to start with low stakes things so that we are able to establish a relationship that really can improve the way that we work together. The layout allows us to have low stakes conversations, building a foundation of successful conversations before we start into things like driving, because that one will start a family fight faster than anything else, and that should never be where you start. When you have that foundation of low stakes conversations that are already under your belt, what it does is it decreases that mental anxiety and the fear of these big, huge conversations that we need to have as a family. And we give each other the opportunity to be able to truly have clarity around what each of us wants. There are conversations that need to be had that are not just about your parents. They're also about the needs of your children. If you have a special needs child like we do in our family, there were some conversations that needed to happen about how we support him in our family, not just the needs of my aging parents. We had to figure out ways that we could care for them in a way that still allowed the capacity to care for our special needs child, potentially for the rest of his life. This is a multifaceted conversation because we're not just talking about stopping everything as the sandwich generation to look forward to taking care of our parents. We have to figure out ways that we can do this in a way that honors all 3 generations. Our kids still need us. Our careers still need us. Our partners still need us. Our friends still need us. And we still need us. But because this conversation feels so full, and we worry as the sandwich generation that our parents' expectation is that we arrange our lives around caring for them as they age, that we avoid this conversation. We don't want to talk about it because it's too much and it's too heavy, and we're afraid of expectations that could happen over here that aren't reality right now. The ability to show up and have conversations that are hard is the foundation of any successful family. But this is not just about the conversation between you and your parents. This is about laying the foundation for future conversations between you and your children. If we as the sandwich generation do not learn this now, we will repeat the mistakes of our parents. We will not be successful in maintaining relationships with our children, and we will be in the exact same place that our parents are 20, 30 years from now. I myself refuse to allow that to happen. I want to do better. I want to be better, and I want to make sure that my children don't feel the stress that I feel.